The Tarrant County Master Gardener Association has partnered with the Tarrant Regional Water District to encourage water conservation. TRWD maintains 4 area lakes and pipelines needed to provide surface water to local water treatment plants so they can clean that water to meet drinking standards for our communities. They also work with many cities in Tarrant County, such as Fort Worth, Arlington, Mansfield, and many others, to provide water conservation programs to the community. Conservation is an important water supply strategy to help meet the needs of our growing population. There are currently 2.3 million people living in Tarrant County, and this is expected to double over the next 50 years. At SaveTarrantWater.com, you can sign up for free weekly watering advice custom to your location. If you're a resident of Tarrant County, you can sign up for a free sprinkler's checkup where a licensed irrigator comes to your home, provides a comprehensive evaluation of your system with recommendations to reduce water waste. There's also an event calendar where you can find information about future classes and workshops. So be sure and check out SaveTarrantWater.com to sign up for their free services.
Hi, how are y'all today? My name is Nancy Curl, and I am a Tarrant County Master Gardener. And today we are going to talk about living wreaths. And we would actually like to show you 3 different frames that you could use to make a living wreath for your very own. So some of the wreaths, the frames that you can use are open frames where you would fill them with sphagnum moss and then wrap them with fishing line. Sometimes you can buy frames that are completely stuffed or pre-stuffed, and then you just have to soak them, and then you'll be able to plant materials within those as well. Or you can come across some deep frames like these where you can plant them on top, or you could turn it over and take the back off of it and plant it that direction. And we're going to show you how to do each of those. So the frames that we use, I personally have not been able to find them locally, but we have found them online, and the company that has been most consistent for us is called topiaryartworks.com. We don't get any kickback from them, but they're a really good company. The wreaths themselves are fairly reasonable. The challenge comes when you're just ordering 1 or 2. Shipping, like everything else, is going to up the price. It could even double the price. So when we actually order, we try to order at least 10 or 12, and that way you can do this project with friends, and then the shipping, will be dispersed among all of you. So it's much easier to do it that way. The other thing I want to talk to you about is a book that I've come across, and there's many, many things online that you're certainly welcome to look at. But my go-to book it's called The Living Wreath by Teddy Colbert. I just happened to come across this. I bought it on Amazon. Again, I do not get a kickback from it, but I'm a very visual learner. And so this particular book has some great ideas about types of living wreaths that you can make. You can see this one that has pansies in it, little spring blooming things. Here's begonias that you could do, again, for spring or for the summer and fall. You can even make one. Here was our inspiration. We're going to be making this today using airplane little plantlets, and this was our inspiration for that one. You can even make wreaths using herbs, where you could plant this with all of your herbs, use it as a tabletop setting, and then just trim away as you need it, or to provide an aromatic environment within your kitchen or on your dining room table. It's very pleasant to do. You can actually also even put vegetables in this. You could put seeds on it, and then that would grow as well. So let's go ahead and get started. And the very first one that we're going to make is going to be the pre-stuffed wreath. All right, and we're going to go ahead and begin with how to make the pre-stuffed wreath. And as you can see, there are different shapes and forms available to this. You can order this interesting square, you can purchase it in a heart shape, you can actually do the round, and that's typically what we do. And if you notice these wreaths, how dry they are, and when you purchase them, that's what they're going to be. They're going to be very, very dry. So what you will need to do is you will need to soak the wreath, saturate it. A lot of times I'll soak it overnight, but it's not really required to soak it that long as it has absorbed enough moisture where the sphagnum within it is pliable. So the pre-stuffed wreath that we're going to make today, we're actually going to use some succulents and sedums for that. But I did want to show you that you can use, you could see in that book, you could use a variety of materials. This one happens to be made up of little baby airplane plants. And so it sometimes overwinters in my greenhouse, and sometimes it doesn't look as fresh as it should when I bring it out in the spring. So all I need to do is go in and from my airplane plant, just trim off some of those and just stick them down in there, and they will refresh it. But what I really wanted you to see about this particular planter, this particular living wreath, is the roots that are on the back of this. When we look at little airplane plants and we pull them up and we see all these little things poking off on the bottom, and we think that those are the roots on them. But the true roots are actually they're actually white, and that's what they'll start growing. So you can see how old this wreath is and how often it's been refreshed. It's at least 5 or 6 years old. So I've constantly used it. It was I guess this was one that I had stuffed because I can see my fishing line in there, but it will continue to grow. So I could have totally pulled it all apart and started over, but I chose to go ahead and just keep this refreshed, and then I'll just trim things off as well. So you can use other kinds of material as well. You know, the book showed you could use begonias, you can use herbs, just all ferns. They're all beautiful. This one is a succulent wreath that I made early on in the spring. And you can go and buy all of these little pieces already made up. I happen to like to see them and watch them grow. So I will come in and I'll take cuttings, and this one's just kind of been left to do its thing. So it should have been cut back and kind of organized a little bit better, but it's doing its own thing. So today we're going to make a square frame living wreath, and this is pre-stuffed from that particular company, or if you can buy them anywhere. And I have soaked this, but the idea is the same thing, where sphagnum has been stuffed into this metal frame, and then it's wrapped with fishing line, and then you're going to be able to make things grow on this. So as we begin, my favorite dibble is a pencil. And a dibble means you're going to go in and make a hole. So like if you're planting seeds or you're planting little plants, you have to make a hole so the roots will go down in there. And I happen to like a pencil. So today we're going to use succulents to plant this particular wreath. And the other materials that I'm going to need is, I've got my heavy duty pruners. I don't use as often as much, but I need my little pruners. Sometimes I just use scissors. And then the other thing that I like to use are these pens. I call them florist pens. You can buy them, again, at any place that sells floral materials. Walmart carries them. Hobby Lobby, you can order them online. These are pretty good size, but what these are going to do is these are going to keep the plant in place as it continues to grow and starts rooting. So I happened to come across this flat of plants. Of all places, I found it at Home Depot. And again, no kickback from Home Depot, but just happened to find these, which is rare because usually Home Depot will only sell the 4-inch size. They might even sell the 2-inch, but coming across this particular tray local was kind of a boon, especially since we're doing this class. But the reason I wanted to show this to you, and you can order these online. Again, you can look up succulents. You can Google that. There are companies that will send those to you. There's different varieties of succulents. You might make it all in one particular variety of succulent or sedum, and it would be beautiful. Just whatever your aesthetic is, that's what's really important. So the main thing I wanted to show you about this is about the size of the plant that we're going to pull up. And I did come in and I watered all of these things, because that's another thing when you are planting. We always advise people to plant wet to wet. And what that means is you want the soil, you want the roots to be moistened. That's going to go into whatever the growing medium is going to be. This one happens to be sphagnum. Whether you're going to go into soil, that's what you want. But tell you just a little bit of a history and how we kind of evolved to using these smaller plants that have a smaller root ball on them is a few years ago when the Botanic Garden started doing butterflies in the garden. And they were doing butterfly topiaries that they still do to this day when they have their butterflies in the garden. But when they initially started those butterfly topiaries, they were using 4-inch size plants. Now, if you think about it, if any of you have ever seen those topiaries, they're huge. The frame, the big wire frames on them are big. You know, you can stuff those down in there. But what they found out was that not all of the plants were really successful. As you're taking those big 4-inch plants and then you're having to tear off part of the root ball to stuff those down into the growing medium, you know, it just took them a lot longer, you know, to come back from that shock and start growing. So what they discovered after that initial year was that if they started growing those their own, or if they could get them where they were using smaller root balls, so they were using, you know, like seed flats or, you know, 1/4 inch, you know, so the root ball themselves would be a lot smaller. The plants, they were having greater success with those topiaries after they started doing that. So just consider that when you're getting ready to plant your very own. So depending on what plant material you have, this doesn't want to come apart very much, what kind of plant material you have, you may want to think about the aesthetics of your living wreath. So if you have a circle wreath, you may want to put them, you know, like in 3 points. Start there, and then you're going to fill out from all of that. This one I'm doing a frame, so therefore I'm more than likely I'm going to start in the middle of each of these long pieces of the square, and then I'm going to plant out from there. You can see that I have this sitting on a plastic tray, and I will say when I have my wreaths finished and I'm either putting them on display in my house on the tabletop, or if I have them out on the patio, most of the time they are going to be laying flat. And so I will sit them in a tray, whether it's this clear plastic tray or sometimes I use the clay pot saucer, and I will put them in that way as well. They will, that way I can water them from the bottom up. I'm kind of tearing that. Where's my little fork that I need? Here we go. This one probably should have been last too. I'm going to tear off some of this plant material. These can be hung on the patio, and I think we're going to probably show you some pictures of how I do hang them back on the patio. You'll have to keep them moist. If you don't, they will probably, you know, succulents and sedums don't take a lot of water, but they take some water, so you can't totally ignore them. All right, so I want those to stay in place, so I'm going to come in and use these pins just to stabilize them, keep them from running away. I think I'm going to take that out and come back in with the same plant. Boy, these just have gone everywhere. Well, I should have taken all these out to pat. Hopefully we'll do some music or something when I have when we have a dead zone.
I live with talking.
I'm sorry?
I live with talking like.
Oh, if it's yeah. Okay, we're going to stabilize that one. You know, you can use ivy as well. There's just such a plethora of plant material that would work really well in a living wreath. You know, you may have some things in your planters, or if you have a greenhouse, you can raid your greenhouse. I tell you really what I like to do with succulents. Like I said, I happened to come across this this flat of them at one of the box stores. Actually, I will just grow a lot of my own. I'll just take cuttings. You know, once they move into the greenhouse, it's time for them to kind of take a rest. And you can just take cuttings and they grow very, very easily. You know, succulents, you can, almost any part of a succulent will grow. You just have to take the piece off of it. Usually it's best once you cut the piece off to let the tip of it harden up, and then you can just either lay that on top of the soil or your planting medium, or you can stick it right down into the soil. So another plant material that you can use that I've had experience with is mondo grass. And I've used the larger wreath that we'll show you in a little bit and planted that in mondo grass. And that planter actually stayed out on my deck under the pergola and out on the regular patio for about 2 years. I mean, I even had a picture at one point where we had one of those rare snow events where snow was actually sitting on the top of it. But you know, mondo grass is a year-round plant that can be planted in your landscape, and it also works really, really well as a living wreath. And what was actually fun about that particular wreath is you could bring that inside, again, use it as a table centerpiece. I did it at one point for Easter, and you could put little Easter eggs around it. It made it it was a living centerpiece. But then you could change it out with different seasons as well. So mondo grass is another really great plant to use. So I think we're going to stop at this point. I think you can see the direction that this is going. You can certainly come back in and fill this in as full as you possibly want it to be. Or if you are like me, where you kind of like to get things started and you want to let it grow and expand, you can see how that does over the season. You can certainly do that as well. The next kind of living wreath that we're going to show you is where you're using an open frame. And this is one, it would come just like this, and again it has a hanger on the back. It has these wonderful little feet on there, so if you're hanging it against a wall, it's not going to lay right up next to that wall or on a door, or you can use it for a tabletop, for a centerpiece, either out on your patio or in the house for the holidays. So this particular one, we're going to, you can see that I have one that is older, and this has kind of all but dried up and shriveled up. It had some material in it. I think it was one where I had planted some ferns in it and neglected it, and it dried out, and so it's now ready for a new life. So this one was made by stuffing the wreath. This is a round one, but it's just a smaller size. Had sphagnum moss that you would come in and make sure that you soak it really good so it absorbs moisture, and then when you get ready to stuff the wreath, you're going to actually squeeze all of this out. And you might notice that I'm wearing gloves doing this, and can't say that I always wear gloves when I'm gardening, but when I'm using sphagnum moss, materials like that, I do like to use gloves. Sometimes there's different kinds of things that are within that sphagnum that I may or may not want on my hands. I may have a little cut or something like that. So it's just going to be for my safety that I go ahead and use gloves as well. And I would say that when this material is really dry, you might want to put this in a container outside. You might even want to wear a mask when you're doing it. It just has a lot of fine material within it, but you want to let it soak probably for a couple of hours at least. And then when you get ready to use it, you're going to have to squeeze it out really, really tight as you get ready to push that back in. Once it's pushed into here, then we're going to keep it within that frame you can use either fishing line. You can see this one already has some in there, or you can use this stiffer wire. Some people call it a paddle wire or a florist wire. You can certainly use that as well. We're going to actually make the airplane plant. To plant this particular living wreath, I try to get similar sizes. You can see that these right here are not too large and they're not too small either. And what I'm going to do is just going to take these little stems off of them. So I have just the plants themselves. And again, as we talked about, you look at the back of this and you think, oh, the roots are already going. Well, they're starting just a little bit, but when it gets true roots, it's going to be those white roots that come out. And I have done this different ways. In the past, I've come in and I've rooted them like in little baby jars, so those great, beautiful, long white roots are already ready to go when I get ready to put it in the living wreath. And sometimes, actually most of the time, I just cut them off with a mother plant and stick them down in there. So I'm going to start looking for some of these so we can plant our wreath. And I want to bring to your attention one other little topiary that I have underneath this hanging basket. This was a metal orb that I bought from Hobby Lobby. It was just for home decoration, and I thought that would make a really cool topiary. So again, I brought it home, and what did I do? But I stuffed it with sphagnum moss, and then I decided to stuff it with all of these airplane plants and hung it right below the mother plant. This little orb thing, this is about 3 years old, and again, I just kind of freshen it up each season, and it seems to be enjoying its life. All right, so airplane plants, you can get them in solid green. They come in green and white stripe, and they come in white and green stripe. So if you could do a combination of these. Yeah, so there's some that are a little bit longer. I could use those and just cut those back. I may still do it if I need some to fill it. So since this is really, really dry, and I want to use some of the, instead of, what I could do is go ahead and totally disassemble this thing, whereas cut off all of the fishing line on it, take out all of the old sphagnum. But what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to hydrate this so it'll puff it up just a little bit, and then I'm going to add fresh sphagnum to this particular wreath. So I'm just going to dip it in water for just a little bit. Okay, so I have hydrated this one, which has added some more moisture into this. I've got some, I'm probably going to tie this off here. One thing that sometimes does happen is sometimes the fishing line or the wire that you're using, sometimes it will loosen, and so some of the material will fall out. But again, all you need to do is get some more fishing line and just rewrap it again. So you can see it's hydrated some, not fully. So what we're going to do is Try not to make too big of a mess. So we want it moist, but we don't want it dripping if we can help it. So I'm going to just push some of that aside. Add some fresh. So you can tell this is how the same process would happen if you were using one from the very beginning. You would just start stuffing this. And sphagnum moss, you can purchase this really anywhere. Any of the garden centers have it. The box stores have it. And we use long strand sphagnum moss. The shorter is not really going to work very well because it'll slip out of the frame, and even if you try to wrap it, it's going to slip out. I think what I may do is once I wrap this, even though this has line on it, I think I will wrap it one more time just to keep all the fresh in there. Reusing what's in there kind of keeps me from having to use too much more. Okay, and I could continue stuffing this, but I think we've got some nice growing medium here. So what I'm going to do is I am going to wrap this one more time. So I'm wrapping all of the new material and keep it in place. And sometimes people worry about, oh, do I need to stuff enough in there so the frame is not showing. You can if you want to, but you have to think about really what your goal is, to have plant material that will then cover any of those metal frames that might be showing. And you'll be able to do this. So you can see why you want to use long strand. And I would pull it as tight as you possibly can as you go. You want the growing medium to stay in there. Only thing you kind of have to get out around is all of these do come with these hangers, so as you're wrapping this, you want to make sure that you keep those free to use. You may not have, your original intent may not be to use it as a hanging wreath. You may want to just use it as a tabletop, but somewhere along the way you might make a decision that oh yeah, that would look nice there for a short period of time. Okay. All right, we're pretty close, so we'll just Okay. So we're ready to start planting some of these, and I'm going to trim them up just a little bit as well, just so they don't look too ratty. Okay, so this is a round one. I am going to kind of think about where I'm planting these to begin with, and then I'll work out from there. So usually when I'm doing a circle one, I'm going to do kind of a triangle to begin with, and then I'll fill in out around that. So again, I'm going to use my favorite dibble, which is a pencil. Now with the sphagnum like this, it's looser. You know, it's not as tight even when I had pre-soaked those. So I do really want to try to get all of that, those false roots down in there and pin it in so when the true roots come in. So I'm going to come down here, put another one. And if the sphagnum appears to be too loose, you can always come back in and put some more fishing line on there. I usually wrap mine before I put the plants in there. Some people like to wrap, they like to go ahead and put their plants in and then wrap it. My personal preference is to go ahead and wrap it first. And again, how many you put in is totally up to you. You can totally fill this thing, or you can just do a few. You know, you might want to make this an advent wreath or something, and you come in and put candles around it, so therefore you don't want it too full, but it's personal choice. Continue, just use up all of these pieces that we have right here. Make it kind of full. Okay, if they a little bit longer, my aesthetic, I want them all but similar in length, so I may come in and trim them. And again, the pins are going to stabilize those plants, encourage them to stay in one place as those roots start growing. So I think we are about ready to stop. So I think you certainly understand the process on how to make a living wreath using an open frame that you can stuff yourself with long strand sphagnum. So the third way that you can make a living wreath is probably one of the easiest. This particular frame also came from that site, topiaryartworks.com, and it actually comes just like this. It comes with coconut fiber liner, and it has this back on it as well. So this actually hooks, so this again can be hung on a wall or a door, or you can set it as a tabletop. So this particular wreath right here, this is one that I made, I guess probably about a month or two ago. And so when the frame that is just like this, I had one that was given to me by a friend who no longer wanted to mess with hers. And mine did not have any kind of a liner with it. It was an older frame, but I was more than happy to take it off of her hands. So when I brought the frame home, I had to figure out, how am I going to plant it? And so I did have to come in and put some kind of a liner. Usually it would be like moss, like sheet moss or something like that. But when these come like this is why I'm telling you it's the easiest. They come just like this. It's a coconut liner. It already has cuts in it, so you can plant it. You can plant it all the way around the top. You can plant it on the side, and you can see that it takes quite a few plants to do that. And then I had an epiphany and realized that I didn't necessarily have to plant it that way, that actually I could come in and take the back off of it. Let's see if I can do that. And then just sit the plants down in it. And you can then use larger sized plants. We talked about when you do topiaries, if you're trying to insert those plants into a growing medium, the smaller the root ball, the more successful those plants will be as they begin to grow. But with this type of a scenario, basically all you're having to do is just put those plants down into this medium and water it sufficiently and give it enough light, and it's going to grow just like it is. So you can go to your box store and you can buy the 4-inch plants and set them down in this. So what happens after a season or two and your coconut liner is kind of shoddy and it's like, what am I going to do now? You can come in and use burlap. Just take a piece of burlap, spread it over the top of it, just stuff it down in there just like that. Fill it with a little bit of soil, and then you're going to be good to go. So you don't have to worry about replacing the liner. You'll still have a plant material that will be successful where the soil is not going to fall out and your plants can still grow. So I'm going to go ahead and grow it this way, or plant it this way. And yes, it does have, and hopefully that's okay, Teresa. There you go. And it does have the cuts and everything in it, but that's okay because that's just going to allow the water to leach out. So it'll be perfectly okay. So what I will do is I'm going to take these plants, and I've got a variety of, so you can see these are slightly smaller than 4-inch, but it still has a really good sized root ball on it. So what I can do, and when we get ready to plant, we don't want it to, girdle or anything, so we're going to open that up just a little bit. So I will probably come in and put some soil in the bottom. Sorry, I keep going out of frame. And then I didn't add water to this. The reason I added some water to this is we talked about planting wet to wet, and that's exactly what you need to do. This was pretty much bone dry soil, and this is just potting soil. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and put a layer down on the bottom of this. So I've got a layer of soil down at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is just take these plants. I'm going to open up the root ball just a little bit, and they can just sit right down in there as I get ready to place these. And again, it's whatever your aesthetic is. You can, again, use pansies. I've used petunias and had them on the back patio all summer. They do really, really well. And what I really love about this particular planter, while it takes quite a few plants and you can use bigger plants, you can get like an immediate impact because you've got the larger plants. I made the selection to go ahead and have them blooming, just so we could have color right away. So I do have a little bit of soil, so I'm going to come in and fill in around here. Now, isn't that lovely? It's like immediate gratification.
Beauty already.
The beauty already. And this is something that you can do. Like I said, you can order these frames. It could be from the company I told you. You might be able to find a local source. I've not had any luck finding them locally, but if you do, let me know. But these frames can be used over and over again, and having this coconut liner, gives it a nice aesthetic. If you didn't have the liner, you could actually also come back in with sheet moss and fill it in with sheet moss as well, and give it a little bit more finished look as well. So those are 3 very, very simple living wreaths that you too can do. And we're going to show you one more that we have learned how to make over the years. Not necessarily the pattern on how to make it, but we'll give an explanation for that in just a minute. So we're going to show you one more way to make a living wreath, and this is using clay pots. We found this idea probably about 5 or 6 years ago, and all that you need for this is a grapevine wreath and some clay pots. And the first one that I made was huge. It was about 16 or 20 inches across, and I decided to go in and use up all of my old clay pots, about 4-inch pots. Well, if you think about 4-inch pots and about 16 to 20-inch size wreath, that puppy became really, really heavy. But the good news is that I was able to hang it on my back patio. I was able to put living plants in there and kept that alive probably for about 2 years. The problem was I couldn't really move it. I would have to tend to it where it was and make sure it had a little bit of water in it and all of that. But the plants did reasonably well. And then after a while, I decided it was a little bit too labor intensive and moved on to something else. So what I have for you today is to just show you how you could make one. Again, using a grapevine wreath, you can use a smaller size wreath, and again, smaller size clay pots. These can be purchased at Hobby Lobby, at Joann Fabrics. You can purchase them online. So it means that they're not going to be quite as heavy. But the way you make this is you use that heavy paddle wire or florist wire, and you just wrap them around the wire frame, so you're framing them in there. So sometimes if you use broken pieces, they are very interesting to look at as well. So the one that I keep, it doesn't want to let go, is this little clay pot frame wreath as well. And so as you can see, it has plants in it. They're kind of different size pots, and hopefully it is aesthetically pleasing. And some of them are even a little bit broken or cracked, but to me that kind of lends charms to it. Now the interesting thing about this one is that these particular plants are not real. These are artificial succulents, so don't tell my Master Gardener friends because they'll boot me out. But it works really well when you just need some decoration, or like I use this for demo purposes, and when I travel I take it with me. So this is something that you can do, but again, it could hold actual living plants. So it just depends on how much time and talent that you have to put that together. But this is another really simple idea that you can do at home. We hope that you've enjoyed some of these ideas, and hopefully you've been inspired to make your own living wreath. Have a good day.